Welcome back to the weekly news, a roundup. These are recorded live Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern as standard time if you like to catch the show live. Of course, just a brief reminder, we will not be live next week. We may not even have a show next week. I have not vanished, well, except I did vanish up into the woods to teach at a camp for a week. So we'll be back the week after I have a conference, so I'll be on a little bit reduced hours then, but nevertheless, I will be around. Be nice if you're on the Matrix server. Ivan and Salbu have the banhammers, and they have authority to do what needs done. Anyway, we'll go ahead and get on into the Linux news today. First up, we did want to mention the OpenSSH server vulnerability. This was an error in the code. Now, this has since been patched, so if you see something about patching OpenSSL, go ahead and do it. It's listed pretty high, although it's not super likely. It also has been observed on 32-bit systems, has not been observed on 64-bit systems. Even on 32-bit systems, it would take 6 to 8 hours of continuous connections in order to run the exploit, but it's still possible, so we got to patch it. So what this allowed people to do is get into certain systems and get in and do basically execute the system as a root user. And then, of course, once they're a root user, you know, they're RMRFing, replacing, going, ha, ha, ha. So you don't want that to happen. Now, this was impactful on glibc systems. So Debian, Ubuntu, Fedora primarily. Exploitation on non-glibc systems, they say, is conceivable, but has not been examined. And again, the testing was on 32-bit Linux glibc systems. So what are we talking about? Like 5 Linux distributions floating around these days? But we'll see. They say exploitation on 64-bit systems is believed to be possible, but has not yet been demonstrated either. So I would say this is not massively important, but certainly keep an eye and patch those OpenSSH systems. It's just an interesting piece of security. This was here. This is just a journalist. Linux news was like this week, so I thought this was fun. And I actually will probably contribute my own review to this, having been working off of my Raspberry Pi with the M.2 Hat for about, I think I installed it, what, about four to 6 weeks ago? I think 4 weeks ago I installed it, mounted it into the system, and I have been using it ever since. So I'll do my own video on that. I don't want to mention that. But what basically he says is he gets this, and he said it is extraordinarily fast. Now, he actually had to make some changes in his system that I did not have to make. Not sure why that was, but he said this promises up to 500 megabit per second data transfer from NVMe drives attached to it, which could be the 2230 or 2242 form factors. So, and that's been my experience as well. He does say that they work quite a bit faster than the SD card, but not significantly faster than running a USB drive in the USB 3 ports. That's curious to me because when I tested running my Raspberry Pi 4 in the USB 4 ports, and I actually found that it was a little slower than the SSD, so I went back to the SSD for that. But now running SSD to the NVMe, night and day. That Raspberry Pi feels every bit of a regular computer, but I'm getting ahead of myself. He does mention here, so this might be something you need to do if you install it and it's not working. It might just be a configuration change. Maybe mine worked fine because I bought my Raspberry Pi 5 very recently, and maybe he bought his a lot earlier. But he does say here, once installed, you need to set the NVMe drive as bootable, which can be achieved by opening a terminal emulator and running the rasbi config command, then go to advanced options boot order, USB boot. However, for some reason, he says he can only do this from the Pi OS, not from Ubuntu. I never did any of that kind of stuff. I'm running MX Linux on mine. So I had my MX Linux running on the SSD card. I simply cloned the SSD card onto the NVMe. I expanded the partition to take advantage of the whole drive. Of course, I did have to reset my FS-tab file, and there's a configuration file in the Raspberry Pi boot directory that I needed to fix. That just had to do with the block calling on the drive, not anything with the booting of this. But I never had a problem. Mine booted instantly. So if you get a Raspberry Pi 5 more recently, it might boot instantly. Or if it doesn't, just need to get into Raspberry Pi OS and run what he says here and get that guy to boot off of the USB drive. So that just sounds like how is the firmware of your particular Pi set up. But he said that now he has it. He says it's finally a decent and reliable computer for everyday use, if you don't mind. And now he said he was running his with an SSD attached to the USB ports, and now we have a nice little system. Of course, he does mention in the article that the downside is I don't know of any of the specific cases allows you to fit the cover on. I know mine doesn't, so my Raspberry Pi M.2 Hat's just kind of breezing in the flapping in the breeze up there. Woo, you know. So that is cool. I did want to mention Audacious. The Audacious Music app has now been updated. It now defaults to GTK 3, but for people that needed a change, I think you could still go back, they said, to GTK 2, but they also have QT6, depending on what your preference is. And they've made some changes to make the app work on Wayland better. The unfortunate thing is they said that the Wayland support broke the Winamp skins. So if you were using Audacious because they're like, I need Winamp because it kicks the llama's heinies, then you absolutely will want to stick with X because it's not working. Now, actually, they did say as a workaround you can run it in X Wayland instead, so you can use Wayland with the X attachments, and that seems to work. Works better with Pipewire now, and overall works quite a bit better. Other changes in the 4.4 release: Last.fm scrubbing plugin works again. Woohoo! Disk number support, option to disable column header support, replay gain, and just a few other odds and ends as well. So if you are into music and you like kicking the llama's hiney, Audacious does work well. Is it Audacious? I don't know. Can't pronounce anything. You guys know this. And on to our chief story. Now, this is not already in it. This is a proposal, so we have to keep this in mind. A proposal has been made for Fedora 32 to collect user data via an opt-in system. Transparency and user control are promised, but doubts linger, and I agree. Especially when I actually looked at the sampling of the data, and it is not data. Like, some of it's fine, some of it's not data I would like to pass on. And that's one of the pieces of feedback they had early on, is people said, hey, you need to have granular control. Let people choose the type of data that is being collected. So in the proposal, what they want to do is work with Azafia for data collection. And one of the things that they propose is collecting the data locally and only uploading it if the user consented to it. But they even said, yeah, that's problematic. We don't want to do anything. So basically, they say metric collections will be completely opt-in. No default settings pre-selected during the initial setup. In other words, you have to explicitly make it so. However, it should be clearly stated that this is currently only a proposal. Now, what type of data is being collected? This is where I'm looking at this going, okay, you just say, yeah, sure, opt-in stuff. There's things in here that get way too deep. So first we have the system details, Fedora version, X or Wayland, GNOME Classic session, the form factor, there's HSI levels, secure boot status, virtual or bare metal, virtualization, what type of information are you using. Then they have the hardware, your manufacturer, model, memory, disk. This is a full fingerprint, folks. For a person that needs to stay private, this is a full fingerprint. Sure, there's nothing that says this is Bob Smith's computer, but if you're collecting data from apps and other things and you're trying to figure out what Bob Smith uses and you've already collected all this information, now we have a Fedora log to confirm what he's actually using. This is a problem. CPU, how many displays? For each display, what's the physical size, the resolution, the scaling factor? These are standard fingerprinting things that people use to identify you all day long. It doesn't matter, it doesn't collect, it doesn't collect your name. No, it just collects everything except your name, which makes finding your name very simple. Solve for X. Okay, got it. How many batteries, remaining capacity of each battery? Peripherals, present, type, model, connection type, printers added, the graphics hardware and the driver, the disk configuration, what file system, partition scheme, home is the home on a separate volume, is the disk encrypted? Performance data, is the disk, how much disk space is used and free? How much disk space is used by Flatpak? What's the memory load status and the memory footprint of specific components? Updates and upgrades. Kernel version, install date, Fedora version and install time, length of time since last update, date and time of the last update, check, updates, are updates staged locally, automatic updates on or off, repos enabled. How many repos do you got? Problems, so you have a couple of shell crashes and things like that. Internalization, display language, format locale, input sources, default input source, country where the device is physically located. Codecs, which codecs? Apps. To inform app development priorities, GNOME software design, dash defaults. Installation, which apps are installed. Format of the apps installed, Flatpak runtimes installed, usage, the number of times each app is launched, length of time app is running, length of time each app is focused, defaults, default browser, default MIME type handlers, default URL handlers. Then there's GNOME shell usages to inform future changes. We want to see frequency of app launching from search. Windows and workspace switching. I mean, we may as well just call this Fedora Windows Edition because are we only halfway? Oh, we're 3/4 of the way through. Okay. This is a tremendous amount of data that is proposed to be collected. Whoever proposed this should be kicked off of the Fedora board. Okay. Just get him out of here. Get him out of here. Jeez. All right, multitasking settings, user accounts, how many regular user accounts, how many enterprise login accounts, sharing settings, are you file sharing on and off, remote desktop on and off, remote login on and off, number and type of online accounts installed, accessibility features enabled, location services enabled, what are your default apps? It sounds like we did that already. Oh, how about files, Nautilus, number of bookmarks, number of starred items, number of remote file systems mounted, times following locations are opened, recent starred, other locations, other XGD folders, and preferences, sort folders before files, expanding folders, list views, action to open items. And then in GNOME boxes, number of GNOME boxes. Is the icon view or the list view used? Are the VMs configured to run in the background? Are VMs still there? And then the number of times help is open, and then the number and types of toolboxes. So there is some fascinating stuff there, folks. I'm sorry, I don't know about you, but I do not want Fedora collecting any form of data. And if they start walking down this path, I'm sorry. The answer is no bueno. That is my take. If you want to help support the channel, we do have a Subscribestar page. You can jump on over there, subscribestar.com/switchedtolinux. So you can have a look over there if you want to help support the channel. Of course, we also have Patreon and locals as well. With that, thanks for watching, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux other than Fedora.